गिरिधारी शिशि राधा विनोद बिहारी जू की जाय। श्री गोविंद गोपीनाथ मरण मोहन जू की जाय। नितिल प्रविष्ट विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतश्वाद शिल भक्ति वेदांत नारायण गोसाई महाराज शिल गुरुदेव की जाय। नितिल प्रविष्ट विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतश्वाद शिल भक्ति वेदांत वामन गोसाई महाराज की जाय। नितिल प्रविष्ट विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतश्वाद शिल भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज शिल प्रभुपाद की जाय। नितिल प्रविष्ट विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतश्वाद शिल भक्ति प्रज्ञान केशव गोसाई महाराज की जाय। नितिल प्रविष्ट विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतश्वाद शिल भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोसाई प्रभुपाद की जाय। नितिल प्रविष्ट महाभागवत शिल गोक्षरस बाबाजी महाराज की जाय। नितिल प्रविष्ट शिल सच्चिदानंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जाय। नितिल प्रविष्ट वैष्णव सार्वभौम शिल जगन्नाथ दास बाबाजी महाराज की जाय। श्री रूपनु गौरी गुरु वर्ग की जाय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल पतदास रघुनाथ शार गोसाई प्रभु की जाय। श्री स्वरूप दामोदर राय रामानंदारी श्री गौर पार्षद वृंद की जाय। नाम चैश लहरस ठाकुर की जाय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुर वृंदावन धाम की जाय। सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदत्त गिरिराज महाराज की जाय। श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जाय। श्री मुनि देवी गंगा देवी की जाय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जाय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जाय। श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाय की जाय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जाय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जाय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जाय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्-भागवतम की जाय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। Let me know if this background animation is distracting. I can change it. All right. Dandavat pranams. Baba Tarini Mataji and Raseshwari Mataji, Rupmanjari Didi, Ganga Didi, Indira Mataji, Gargaraji. I already said Rupmanjari Didi, right? Yes. Yeah, nice. I have a nice backdrop this time, don't I? I'm in Yashodanandan Prabhu's place, Justin Connor, who did the Golden, what's it called? The Golden Age film. Oh, and I bet Nuri Hari Prabhu might be watching also, so Dandavat pranams to him also. Haribol. All right, so let's start. Where is it? One second. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namane. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Itadalaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano viraha katara ajuhava putreti tanmayataya taravo bhinedu stang sarvabhuta hridayam munimanatosmi narayanam namaskritam narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet. Shrinvatang svakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana Hridantasto yabhadrani vidhunoti suritsatam Nashta prayeshvavadreshu nityang bhagavata sevaya Bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki tavai vasmi na jivami tvaya vina iti vigyaya radhe tam nayamam charanantikam bhaktya vihina aparada lakshay kshiptashtakamaदिtaranga madhe kripa maitam sharanam prapanna vrinde namaste charanarvindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Oh, that's very kind of you, Bhavatarani Mati and Hari Prabhu. You're very kind, and I seek your blessings to be able to go through your all of Srila Prabhupada's purports seriously, and not just going through it for knowledge. Dandavat pranams. Dandavat pranams, Madhavi Didi. All right, so let's go over what we read yesterday. Bhagavat Subodhini. So we read, oh wait, no, that's chapter 14. Let's just read this full thing. What up to what verse? Verse 29 is it? Sorry. Yeah, okay, so let's read the first 28 verses. We'll read from here. Read the qualities of a sannyasi, conversation between Prahlada Maharaj and an avadhut brahman. Actually, let's start from there. Okay, so we read about the conduct of a sannyasi, the consciousness of a sannyasi, and the other qualities of a sannyasi. And now we're gonna we'll recap from the conversation between Prahlada and an avadhut brahman. In the previous chapter, Narad Muni described the duties of a brahmachari and vanaprastha. In this chapter, he describes the conduct of the sannyasi through a conversation between Prahlada with a renounced person. I'm reading a little bit quietly because somebody's doing a yoga session in the room next to me, so I don't want to disturb them. Conduct of a sannyasi. A sannyasi is detached, merely keeping the body inhabitable. A sannyasi is... Oh wait, we're not going through that. Let's just go through these qualities. A sannyasi is not dependent on anything material. He travels on earth, passing only one night in a village. If he wears something, he wears only a loincloth and an outer covering. When there is no necessity, he should not even accept a danda. A sannyasi should wander alone, should live only on alms begged. He should be completely satisfied in the self, not dependent on any person or any place, and he should be a well-wisher to all living beings. He should be peaceful and completely surrendered unto Lord Narayan. A sannyasi sees the Supreme Lord who is beyond cause and effect, pervading everything, and he sees everything, which is composed of cause and effect, as resting on the Supreme Lord. He understands the self during deep sleep, dreaming, and waking states. He realizes that bondage and liberation are actually illusory, and he observes the power of time that causes appearance and disappearance of all beings, instead of praising the uncertain life or death. Let's just go through it all. So the sannyasi, literature without spiritual benefit should be rejected. One should not become a professional teacher, nor indulge in arguments and take sides. Disciples. He must not present material allurements to gather many disciples. Books. He should not read many books or give discourses as a means of livelihood. Temples. He should not attempt to build many temples to increase material opulence. There's a note here. The first business of the sannyasi is to preach Krishna Krishna consciousness. But if by the grace of Krishna facilities are available, then he may construct temples to give shelter to the serious students of bhakti. That's from Srila Prabhupada. Then the Paramahansa stage. A spiritually advanced person who is peaceful and equipoised does not need to accept the symbols of a sannyasi like a tridanda and kamandalu. As per necessity, he sometimes accepts and sometimes rejects them. Evident purpose. Although he may not expose himself, by his behavior, his purpose is disclosed. Although he is the greatest orator or poet, he externally presents himself like a dumb man or a child. Link. Narad Muni further describes the behavior of such a saintly person by narrating a conversation that happens between Prahlada Maharaj and an avadhut brahman. So Prahlad meets a brahman and inquires from him. One second, let me just see if that was... Okay. The sages recite a historical example on this. Once on Sahya mountain, Prahlada Maharaj met a saintly person lying on the ground, covered with dust, feeding himself like a python. By his activities, bodily features, words, people could not understand whether he was some person they knew. Prahlad, an advanced devotee, duly worshipped that saintly person, touching his feet with his head. He then inquired from him submissively as follows. And there's a link here. Prahlad studied the bodily features of the saintly person and understood that he was intelligent and expert, although he was lying down and not doing anything. Prahlad was naturally inquisitive about why he was lying there inactive. Oh, and Indira Mataji in our WhatsApp group, she sent a picture. Let me find it. Is this working? Okay, it looks like it is. Let me find the picture. Where is it? Here it is. There it is. There is the avadhut Brahman lying down inactive. There's Prahlad Maharaj. And I guess those are the ministers. All right. So let's go back. Okay. So Prahlad asked the saint, "You do not work to earn your livelihood, but you have a stout body, like that of a materialistic enjoyer. You have no money for sense enjoyment. How then has your body become so fat? You appear learned and intelligent, yet you lie down inactive, looking at people doing actions with disgust." Captivated by Prahlad's sweet words, the saintly person replied with a smile. The Brahman glorifies Prahlad Maharaj. "O best of demons, you are respected by advanced men. You are aware of the different stages of life, and by your inner spiritual vision, you can see a man's character and the results of his actions." Link. In the next verse, the saintly Brahman reveals that the cause of Prahlad's knowledge is his unalloyed bhakti, unmixed with fruit of acts or speculative knowledge towards Krishna. Because of your pure devotion to Bhagavan Narayan, he is predominant in your heart. He always drives away ignorance, as the sun drives away the darkness of the universe. Although you know everything, you ask some questions. I shall answer you, though I have taken a vow of silence. I shall break it. I shall answer you according to what I have heard from authorities, not concocted, and I will do this for my self-purification. Then the Brahman describes the futility of material happiness. Due to insatiable material desires, I was being carried by the waves of material nature's laws, acting in different ways, struggling for existence in various species. In the course of such evolution in species, by my karma, I have attained this human life, which can elevate one to heaven or liberation, or degrade one to lower species or rebirth as a human. Note: material life is called pavarga because here we are subject to 5 different states of suffering, represented by the letters as we mentioned yesterday, in the Sanskrit alphabet. The alphabet's divided into different vargas, different groups of letters, and so the first is the ka varga, ka ka ga ga nga, and the cha varga, cha cha ja janya, then the ta varga, ta ta da da na, then the ta varga, ta ta da ta na, then comes the pa varga, which is pa pa ba ba ma. So pa varga, each one of these pa pa ba ba ma has a meaning. So pa means parishram. One labors very hard. They labor so hard that fa means pena. They start to foam from the mouth due to that labor. But they labor so hard, and what comes from that labor? Ba, which means vyartata, or disappointment. Despite their hard labor, they're disappointed, like they didn't get what they achieved, or they got what they achieved, but they didn't get the satisfaction that they're expecting. And they get all these things, but then they're afraid that they're going to lose it. They get all this wealth, somebody's going to steal it from me, or so bha, which means bhai, fear, due to not knowing what will happen next. And then finally, at the end, ma means mrityu, or death. They lose it all. So one attains apavarga. So if you put an a before a word, it makes it the opposite of that. So one attains apavarga, or liberation from the material existence, when one attempts to nullify these 5 different statuses of life, the pavarga. I abandoned material acts because I saw that a man and a woman unite for pleasure in sex, but they actually do not become happy. Material sense enjoyment is simply an imagination. Spiritual happiness is real happiness, and it can be achieved only when one stops all materialistic activities. Note, one cannot simply cease from materialistic activity and remain inactive for long. One should engage in spiritual activities according to the orders of Lord Krishna, which will solve the problem of suffering. The conditioned soul forgets his self-interest, his eternal relationship with Krishna, due to bodily identification. Attracted by the varieties of the material world, he suffers. Note, as Krishna is always happy, the living entities, who are his parts and parcels, are also happy by nature. But because of being put within this material world and forgetting their eternal relationship with Krishna, they suffer. So this is where we read up to 29. This is going directly in opposition to Padmanabha Goswami's whole thing. Anyways, doesn't matter. All right, where do I have it open? There it is. Verse 29. Okay. What time is it? Okay. Jalang tad bhavaishchanam hetvagyo jalakamyaya mrega trishnam upadhavit tattanyatrartadriksvata. Just as a deer, because of ignorance, cannot see the water within a well covered by grass, but runs after water elsewhere, the living entity covered by the material body does not see the happiness within himself, but runs after happiness in the material world. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This is an accurate example depicting how the living entity, because of lack of knowledge, runs after happiness outside his own self. When one understands his real identity as a spiritual being, he can understand the supreme spiritual being, Krishna, and the real happiness exchange between Krishna and oneself. It is very interesting to note how this verse points to the body's growth from the spirit soul. The modern materialistic scientists thinks that grows from matter, but actually the fact is that matter grows from life. The life, or the spiritual soul, is compared to water, from which clumps of matter grow in the form of grass. One who is ignorant of scientific knowledge of the spirit soul does not look inside the body to find happiness in the soul. Instead, he goes outside to search for happiness, just as a deer, without knowledge of the water beneath the grass, goes out to the desert to find water. The Krishna consciousness movement is trying to remove the ignorance of misled human beings who are trying to find water outside the jurisdiction of life. Raso vaisa. Rasoham apsukunteya. The taste of water is Krishna. To quench one's thirst, one must taste water by association with Krishna. This is the Vedic injunction. Dehadibir daivatantrar atmana sukami hata dukhatayam chanishasya kriyamogha krita krita. The living entity tries to achieve happiness and rid himself of the causes of distress. But because the various bodies of the living entities are under the full control of material nature, all his plans in different bodies, one after another, are ultimately baffled. Purport. Because the materialist and gross intelligence... Sorry. I have my left ear is completely blue here. Sorry. Because the materialist is in gross ignorance of how the laws of material nature act on him as a result of his fruitive activity, he mistakenly plans to enjoy bodily comfort in the human form of life through so-called economic development, through pious activities for elevation to the higher planetary systems, and in many other ways. But factually, he becomes a victim of the reactions of his fruitive activities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated as a supersoul within the cores of the hearts of all living entities, as the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matasmritir jnanam apohanam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. The desires and activities of the living being are observed by the Supersoul, who is the Upadrashta, the overseer, and who orders material nature to fulfill the various desires of the living being. As clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita 18:61, Ishvara sarvabhutanam hriddesher junatishtati brahmayan sarvabhutani yantrarudhani mayaya. The Lord is situated in everyone's heart, and as one desires, the Lord gives one various types of bodies, which are like machines. Riding on such a machine, the living entity wanders throughout the universe under the control of material nature and its modes. Thus, the being is not at all free to act, but is fully under the control of material nature, which is fully under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As soon as a living entity is victimized by material desires to lord it over material nature, he is subjected to the control of material nature, which is supervised by the Supreme Soul. The result is that one again and again makes plans and is baffled, but as foolish as he is, he cannot see the cause of his bafflement. This cause is distinctly stated in Bhagavad Gita. Because one has not surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he must work under the control of material nature and its stringent laws. Daivi hiesha gunamai mama maya durattaya. The only means of becoming free from this entanglement is surrender to the Supreme Lord. In the human form of life, the living entity must accept this instruction from the Supreme Person, Krishna. Sarva dharma parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Do not plan to achieve happiness and drive away distress. You will be successful. Simply surrender unto me. Unfortunately, however, the living entity does not accept the Supreme Lord's clearly stated instructions from Bhagavad Gita, and thus he becomes a perpetual captive of the laws of material nature. Yagyartart karmanonyatra lokoyam karmandana. If one does not act for the satisfaction of Krishna, who is known as Vishnu or Yagya, he must be entangled in the reactions of fruitive activities. These reactions are called papa and punya, sinful and pious. By pious activities, one is elevated to the higher planetary systems, and by impious activities, one is degraded to lower species of life, in which he is punished by the laws of nature. In the lower species of life, there is an evolutionary process, and when the term of the living entity's imprisonment or punishment in the lower species is finished, he is again offered a human form and given a chance to decide for himself which way he should plan. If he again misses the opportunity, he is again put into the cycle of birth and death, going sometimes higher and sometimes lower, turning on the samsara chakra, the wheel of material existence. As a wheel sometimes goes up and sometimes goes down, the stringent laws of material nature make the living entity in material existence sometimes happy and sometimes distressed. How he suffers in the cycle of happiness and distress is described in the next verse. Adhyatmika dibir dukkar avimuktasya karhichit martyasya krichropanatar arthai kamai kriyetakim. Materialistic activities are always mixed with three kinds of miserable conditions: adhyatmika, adidaivika, and adibhotika. Therefore, even if one achieves some success by performing such activities, what is the benefit of this success? One is still subjected to birth, death, old age, disease, and the reactions of his fruitive activities. Purport. According to the materialistic way of life, if a poor man, after laboring very, very hard, gets a material profit at the end of his life, he is considered a success, even though he again dies while suffering the threefold miseries, adhyatmika, adidaivika, and adibhotika. No one can escape the threefold miseries of materialistic life, namely miseries pertaining to the body and mind, miseries pertaining to the difficulties imposed by society, community, nation, and other living entities, and miseries inflicted upon us by natural disturbances from earthquakes, famines, droughts, floods, epidemics, and so on. If one works very hard, suffering the threefold miseries, and then is successful in getting some small benefit, what is the value of this benefit? Besides that, even if a karmi is successful in accumulating some material wealth, he still cannot enjoy it, for he must die in bereavement. I have even seen a dying man begging a medical attendant to increase his life by 4 years so that he could complete his material plans. Of course, the medical man was unsuccessful in expanding the life of the man, who therefore died in great bereavement. Everyone must die in this way, and after one's mental condition is taken into account by the laws of material nature, he is given another chance to fulfill his desires in a different body. Material plans for material happiness have no value, but under the spell of the illusory energy, we consider them extremely valuable. There were many politicians, social reformers, and philosophers who died very miserably without deriving practical value from their material plans. Therefore, a sane and sensible man never desires to work hard under the conditions of the threefold miseries, only to die in disappointment. Pashyami dhaninam klesham lubdhanam ajitatmanam bhayad alabdha nidranam sarvato bhivishankinam. The Brahman continued, I am actually seeing how a rich man, who is a victim of his senses, is very greedy to accumulate wealth, and therefore suffers from insomnia due to fear from all sides, despite his wealth and opulence. Purport. Greedy capitalists accumulate wealth under so many miserable conditions, the result being that because they collect money by questionable means, their minds are always agitated. Thus they are unable to sleep at night, and they have to take pills for mental tranquility to invite sleep. And sometimes even the pills are a failure. Consequently, the result of having accumulated money by so much labor is certainly not happiness, but only distress. What is the value of acquiring a comfortable position if one's mind is always disturbed? Narottam Das Thakur has therefore sung, Sangsara Vishanale Divanishi Hiya Jwale Juraite Na Koi No Upay. I am suffering from the poisonous effect of material enjoyment. Thus my heart is always burning and is almost on the verge of failure. The result of the greedy capitalist's unnecessary accumulation of wealth is that he must suffer from a blazing fire of anxiety and always be concerned with how to save his money and invest it properly to get more and more. Such a life is certainly not very happy, but because of the spell of the illusory energy, materialistic persons engage in such activities. As far as our Krishna consciousness movement is concerned, we are getting money naturally by the grace of God by selling our literature. This literature is not sold for a sense gratification, to To spread the Krishna consciousness movement, we need so many things, and Krishna is therefore supplying us the requisite money to advance this mission. The mission of Krishna is to spread Krishna's all over the world, and for this purpose, we naturally must have sufficient money. Therefore, according to the advice of Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, we should not give up the attachments to money that can spread the Krishna. We should not give up the attachments to money that can spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Srila Rupa Goswami says in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-256, Prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastuna mumukshu vibhago vairagyam falgu katyate. When persons eager to achieve liberation renounce things which are related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, though they are material, this is called incomplete renunciation. Important point. Money that can help in spreading the Krishna consciousness movement is not a part of the material world, and we should not give it up thinking that it is material. Srila Rupa Goswami advises, Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchyate. When one is not attaching, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. It's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-255. Money is undoubtedly coming in great quantities, but we should not be attached to this money for sense gratification. Every cent should be spent for spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, not for sense gratification. There is danger for a preacher when he receives great quantities of money, for as soon as he spends even a single cent of the collection for his personal sense gratification, he becomes a fallen victim. This is important for me. The preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement should be extremely careful not to misuse the immense quantities of money needed to spread this movement. Let us not make this money the cause of our distress. It should be used for Krishna, and that will cause our eternal happiness. Money is Lakshmi, or the goddess of fortune, the companion of Narayan. Lakshmiji must always remain with Narayan, and then there need be no fear of degradation. So he always wants to be using Lakshmi so that she can be with Narayan. Any Lakshmi we get, we try to reunite her with Narayan, use her in the service of her beloved. Treat money with that kind of respect. Rajatas chauratas shatro svajanat pashupakshita artibhya kalata swasman nityam pranartavar bhayam. Those who are considered materially powerful and rich are always full of anxieties because of governmental laws, thieves and rogues, enemies, family members, animals, birds, persons seeking charity, the inevitable time factor, and even their own selves. Thus, they are invariably afraid. Purport. The word swasmat means from oneself. Because of attachment for money, the richest person is even afraid of himself. He fears that he may have locked his money in an unsafe manner, or might have committed some mistake. Aside from the government and its income tax, and aside from thieves, even a rich man's own relatives are always thinking of how to take advantage of him and take away his money. Sometimes these relatives are described as swajanadasyu, which means rogues and thieves in the guise of relatives. Therefore, there is no need to accumulate wealth or unnecessarily endeavor for more and more money. The real business of life is to ask, "Who am I?" and to understand oneself. I think this is a mistake here. Anyways, to understand oneself, the world, I don't know what it's supposed to be saying here, and to understand how to return home back to Godhead. Let's see if it's here when I take it out of this view. No, it's still like that. Anyways. Shoka moha bhaya krodha raga klaiba shramadha Yam mulasyor nirnam jahyat spriham pranartayor buddha. Those in human society who are unintelligent should give up the original cause of lamentation, illusion, fear, anger, attachment, poverty, and unnecessary labor. The original cause of all these is the desire for unnecessary prestige and money. Report. Here is the difference between Vedic civilization and the modern demoniac civilization. Vedic civilization concerned itself with how to achieve self-realization, and for this purpose, one was recommended to have a small income to maintain body and soul together. The society was divided into Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, and the members of the society would limit their endeavors to meeting their minimum demands. The Brahmins, in particular, would have no material desires. Because the Kshatriyas had to rule the people, it was necessary for them to have money and prestige. But the Vaishyas were satisfied with agricultural produce and milk from the cow, and if by chance there was success, trade was allowed. The Shudras were also happy, for they would get food and shelter from the three higher classes. In the demoniac civilization of the present day, however, there is no question of Brahmins or Kshatriyas. There are only so-called workers and a flourishing mercantile class who have no goal in life. According to Vedic civilization, the ultimate perfection of life is to take sannyas, but at the present moment, people do not know why sannyas is accepted. Because of misunderstanding, they think that one accepts sannyas to escape social responsibilities. But one does not accept sannyas to escape from responsibility to society. Generally, one accepts sannyas at the fourth stage of spiritual life. One begins as a brahmachari, then becomes a grihastha, a vanaprastha, and finally a sannyasi to take advantage of the duration of one's life by engaging oneself fully in self-realization. Sannyas does not mean begging from door to accumulate money for sense gratification. However, because in Kali Yuga people are more or less prone to sense gratification, immature sannyas is not recommended. Srila Rupa Goswami writes in his Nectar of Instruction, verse 2, Atyahara prayashascha prajalpo niyamagraha jana sangashchalolyam cha sharbir bhaktir vinashyati. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. 2. Over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. 3. Talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. 4. Practicing the spiritual and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. Then 5. Associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And 6. Being greedy for mundane achievements. A sannyasi should have an institution meant to preach Krishna consciousness. He need not accumulate money for himself. We recommend that as soon as money accumulates in our Krishna consciousness movement, 50% of it should be invested in printing books, and 50% for expenditures, especially in establishing centers all over the world. That's really interesting. Let me save this. This is how Prabhupada wanted it. Nobody in our society has ever given any money to GVP. I mean, like, officially. Anyways, doesn't matter. And 50% for expenditure, especially establishing centers all over the world. The managers of the Krishna consciousness movement should be extremely cautious in regard to this point. Otherwise, money will be the cause of lamentation, illusion, fear, anger, material attachment, material poverty, and unnecessary hard work. When I was alone in Vrindavan, I never attempted to construct mats or temples. Rather, I was fully satisfied with the small amount of money I could gather by selling back to Godhead, and thus I would provide for myself and also print the literature. When I went to foreign countries, I lived according to the same principle, but when Europeans and Americans began to give money profusely, I started temples and deity worship. The same principle should still be followed. Whatever money is collected should be spent for Krishna, and not a farthing for sense gratification. This is the Bhagavat principle. Oh, that was a great purport. Hey, look, my name. Madhukara Mahasarpo Lokesmin no Guruttamo Vairagyam Paritosham cha Praptayat Chikshaya Vayam. The bee and the python are two excellent spirits who give us exemplary instructions regarding how to be satisfied by collecting only a little and how to stay in one place and not move. Viraga sarakamebhya shikshito me madhuvratat krichraptam madhuvad vitan hatvapyanyo harit patim. From the bumblebee, I have learned to be unattached to accumulating money, for although money is as good as honey, anyone can kill its owner and take it away. Purport. The honey gathered in the comb is taken away by force. Therefore, one who accumulates money should realize that he may be harassed by the government or by thieves or even killed by enemies. Especially in this age of Kali Yuga, it is said that instead of protecting the money of the citizens, the government itself will take away the money with the force of law. The learned Brahman had therefore decided that he should not accumulate any money. He should own as much as he immediately needs. There is no need to keep a big balance at hand, along with the fear that it may be plundered by the government or by thieves. Aniha paritushtatma yadricho panataraham no chichaye bavrahani mahahir iha sattvam. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I feel tired. I do not endeavor to get anything, but am satisfied with whatever is achieved in its own way. If I do not get anything, I am patient and unagitated like a python, and lie down in this way for many days. Purport. One should learn detachment from the bumblebees, for they collect drops of honey here and there and keep it in their honeycomb. But then someone comes by force and takes all the honey away, leaving the bumblebees with nothing. Therefore, one should learn from the bumblebee not to keep more money than one needs. Similarly, one should learn from the python to stay in one place for many, many days without food, and then eat only if something comes in its own way. Thus the learned Brahman gave instructions gained from the two creatures, namely the bumblebee and the python. How do you say python? 1 second. Oh shoot, I wasn't. It's Mahasarpa. The Mahasarpa and the Madhukar. Okay, where did I read up to? Okay. Quachir. Oh wow. That's one verse? Interesting. Let me. Quachiralpam quachir bhuri bhunjinam svaduva quachir bhuri gunopetang gunahinam uta quachit shraddhayo pahritam kwapi kadachin manavarjitam bunje bhuktvatavakam kasminschid devanaktam yadrichaya. Sometimes I eat a very small quantity, and sometimes a great quantity. Sometimes the food is very palatable, and sometimes it is stale. Sometimes prasad is offered with great respect, and sometimes food is given neglectfully. Sometimes I eat during the day, at night. Thus I eat what is easily available. Shangkulam ajinam chiram valkalam vasenyar apisam praptam dishta bhuktushta dhiraham. For my body, I use whatever is available, whether it be linen, silk, cotton, bark, or deerskin, according to my destiny, and I am fully satisfied and unagitated. Kvachit chaye daropaste trena parnashma bhasmasu, kvachit prasada paryanke kashipo va parichaya. Sometimes I lie on the surface of the earth, sometimes on leaves, grass, or stone, sometimes on a pile of ashes, or sometimes, by the will of others, in a palace on a first-class bed with pillows. Purport. The learned Brahman's description indicates different types of births, for one lies down according to one's body. Sometimes one takes birth as an animal, and sometimes as a king. When he takes birth as an animal, he must lie down on the ground. And when he takes birth as a king or a very rich man, he is allowed to lie in first-class rooms in huge palaces decorated with beds and other furniture. Such facilities are not available, however, at the sweet will of the living entity. Rather, they are available by the supreme will, parichaya, or by the arrangement of Maya. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 1861, Ishvara sarvabhutanam hriddesher junatishtati brahmayan sarvabhutani yatarudhani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The living entity, according to his material desires, receives different types of bodies, which are nothing but machines offered by material nature according to the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By the will of the Supreme, one must take different bodies with different means for lying down. Kvachit snato nuliptanga suvasasragvalankrita rate bhashvaischare kvapi Degvasa grahavar vibho. O my Lord, sometimes I bathe myself very nicely, smear sandalwood pulp all over my body, put on a flower garland, and dress in fine garments and ornaments. Then I travel like a king on the back of an elephant, or on a chariot or horse. Sometimes, however, I travel naked, like a person haunted by a ghost. Naham ninde na chastomi swabhava vishamam janam etesham shreya ashase uttai katmyam mahatmani. Different people are of different mentalities. Therefore, it is not my business either to praise them or to blaspheme them. I only desire their welfare, hoping that they will agree to become one with the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Purport. As soon as one comes to the platform of Bhakti Yoga, one understands fully the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. Sorry, what? Is it missing a word there? As soon as one comes to the platform of Bhakti Yoga, one understands fully the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. That Vasudeva is the goal of life. Vasudeva samam eti samahatmas durlabam. This is the instruction of all the Vedic literature. Vedaishta sarvar aham eva vedya. And also sarva dharma parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. There is no use in praising someone for material qualifications or blaspheming him for material disqualifications. In the material world, good and bad have no meaning, because if one is good, he may be elevated to a higher planetary system, and if one is bad, he may be degraded to the lower planetary systems. People of different mentalities are sometimes elevated and sometimes degraded. But this is not the goal of life. Rather, the goal of life is to become free from the elevation and degradation and take to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, a saintly person does not discriminate between that which is supposedly good and supposedly bad. Rather, he desires for everyone to be happy in Krishna consciousness, which is the ultimate goal of life. Vikalpam juhuyat shitto tang manasyartha vibhrame mano vaikarike hutva tang mayayang juhotanu. The mental concoction of discrimination between good and bad should be accepted as one unit, and then invested in the mind, which should then be invested in the false ego. The false ego should be invested in the total material energy. This is the process of fighting false discrimination. Purport. This verse describes how a yogi can become free from material affection. Because of material attraction, a karmi cannot see himself. Jnanis can discriminate between matter and spirit, but the yogis, the best of whom are the bhakti yogis, want to return home back to Godhead. The karmis are completely an illusion. The jnanis are neither an illusion nor in positive knowledge. But the yogis, the bhakti yogis, are completely on the spiritual platform. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down under any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Thus, a devotee's position is secure. A devotee is at once elevated to the spiritual platform. Others, such as the jnanis and hatha yogis, can only gradually ascend to the spiritual platform by nullifying their material discrimination on the platform of psychology and nullifying the false ego by which one thinks, I am this body, a product of matter. One must merge the false ego into the total material energy and merge the total material energy into the supreme energetic. This is the process of becoming free from material attraction. Atmanubhutatang mayam juhuyat satadring muni tato niriho viramit swanubhutatmani stita. A learned, thoughtful person must realize that material existence is illusion. This is possible only by self-realization. This person is actually seen the truth from all material activities being situated in self-realization. Purport. By an analytical study of the entire constitution of the body, one can surely come to the conclusion that the soul is different from all the body's material constituents, such as water, fire, and air. Thus, the difference between the body and the soul can be realized by a person thoughtful, manishi or muni. And after this realization of the individual spirit soul, one can very easily understand the supreme spirit soul. If one thus realizes that the individual soul is subordinate to the supreme spirit soul, he achieves self-realization. As explained in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there are two souls within the body. The body is called kshetra, and there are two kshetragyas, or occupants of the body, namely the supersoul, paramatma, and the individual soul. The supersoul and the individual soul are like two birds sitting on the same tree, the material body. One bird, the individual, the forgetful bird, is eating the fruit of the tree, not caring for the instructions of the other bird, which is only a witness to the activities of the first bird, who is his friend. When the forgetful bird comes to understand the supreme friend who is always with him and trying to give him guidance in different bodies, he takes shelter at the lotus feet of that supreme bird. As explained in the yoga process, dhyana vastita katena manasa pashyanti yam yogi. That's Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 12.13.1. When one actually becomes a perfect yogi, by meditation, he can see the supreme friend and surrender unto him. This is the beginning of bhakti yoga, or actual life in Krishna consciousness. Swatmavritam mayetam te suguptam apivarnitam vyapitam lokasastrabhyam bhavan hi bhagavat para. Prahlada Maharaj, you are certainly a self-realized soul and a devotee of the Supreme Lord. You do not care for public opinion or so-called scriptures. For this reason, I have described to you without hesitation the history of my self-realization. Purport. A person who is actually a devotee of Krishna does not care about so-called public opinion and Vedic or philosophical literatures. Prahlada Maharaj, who is such a devotee, always defied the false instructions of his father and the so-called teachers who were appointed to teach him. Instead, he simply followed the instructions of Narad Muni, his guru, and thus he always remained a stalwart devotee. This is the nature of an intelligent devotee. The Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam instructs, Yagyai Sankirtana Prayar Yajanti Hi Sumedasaha. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 11.532. One who is actually very intelligent must join the Krishna consciousness movement, realizing his own self as an eternal servant of Krishna, and thus practice constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Is this the last verse? I think there's 40. We're reading 46 verses. Yes, it is. Shri Naraduvacha Dharmam Paramahamsyam Vai Mune Shrutva Sureshwara Pujayitva Tata Prita Amantra Prayayo Griham. Narad Muni continued. After Prahlada Maharaj, the king of the demons, heard these instructions from the saint, he understood the occupational duties of a perfect person, a Paramahamsa. Thus, he duly worshipped the saint, took his permission, and then left for his own home. Purport. As quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 8.128, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Kiva Vipra Kiva Nyasi Shudra Kene Noi Jai Krishna Tattva Veta She Guru Hoy. A guru, or spiritual master, can be anyone who is well conversant with the science of Krishna. Therefore, although Prahlada Maharaj was a grihastha ruling over the demons, he was a Paramahamsa, the best of human beings, and thus he is our guru. In the list of gurus, or authorities, Prahlada Maharaj's name is therefore mentioned. Swayampur Narada Shambhu Kumara Kapila Manu Prahlado Janako Bhishmo Balir Vayasakir Vayam. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 6.320. The conclusion is that the Paramahamsa is an exalted devotee, Bhagavat Priya. Such a Paramahamsa may be in any stage of life, brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, or sannyas, and be equally liberated and exalted. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 7th canto, 13th chapter of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled The Behavior of a Perfect Person. Alright. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. Just looking at the comments. Root Manjari, is that when it was talking about the family members being the dasyu, right? Rogues and thieves. Tirthamaraj used to call everybody traveling with him on Bengal Prachar different demon names. My name was Bakasura, I think because I have a long beak. Big nose, I don't know. He just tried to raise money for the GVP. It was a little surprising who participated. Oh, I want to show you my shirt. Look, I just got this shirt made. See, Gaudiya Vedanta Publications. But yeah, that's really cool, Rup Manjari. And Haribo Champak Didi Dandavat Pranams. Yes, I am glad that I wasn't named the Mahasarpa, but I got the name Madhukar. Let me see. I mean, that would be kind of cool to be called Mahasarpa, the great snake python. Yeah. Oh, Champakalata Didi is there. Haribo. I'm going to see you in person in just 2 minutes from now. Alright. Haribo, everybody. Oh, yes. You can tell your mother, Pujamna Prabhu Mantramurti Mataji, I'm fine, safe from COVID, and I'm taking enough rest. Yes. All right. See you in a moment, Champakalati. Dandavat pranams, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. 1 second. Let's see. What are we going to read tomorrow? I think tomorrow is it about grahastas? I think the 14th and 15th chapter were about grahastas, if I remember correctly. Let's see. Ideal family life, yes. So we're going to read about the duties of a grahasta, the times and places suitable for religious activities, and the importance of worshipping the deity, Brahman, and Achyuta. And then I think the 15th chapter, also that's the last chapter of this 7th canto, instructions for civilized human beings. All right. I think we're going to be finished with this 7th canto in less than a week, I think. We only have 2 chapters left. All right, Dandavat pranams, everybody. Thank you for joining me. See you all tomorrow. Jai Shri Radhe. And let me know if that moving background is annoying. There's tons of different backgrounds here. Yeah, I just did that one for fun. All right, Haribo. Oh wait, I have to do Jaitvani. Jai Shishi Guru Garanga Gandharvika Giridhari Shishi Radha Vinod Vihari Ju Ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madan Mohan Ju Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashata Shmad Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Shila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashata Shmad Shila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashata Shmad Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashata Shmad Shila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatarashata Shmad Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Mahabhagavat Shila Gorksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Shila Satchitaranda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopala Pitadash Raghunath Shara Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Nama Chai Shri Hairas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Braja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Vidata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Jai. Bhakta Prabhar Shri Prahlada Maharaj Ki Jai. What is the avadhut brahman Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Vo. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavascha Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Satyavatai Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyai Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams, everybody. See you all tomorrow. And see you right now, Champakalata Didi. Haribol. Thanks for joining me.